In this edition of Campaign 2018 Local Matters, we take a look at Michigan. The Mitten State's primaries are just 2 weeks away. Voter turnout is expected to be high. If you live in Michigan but haven't already registered to vote, you won't be able to participate in the primaries, but you can vote in the general if you register by October 9th. Joining me now from Michigan's capital, Lansing, is Jonathan Oosting. He is a political reporter for the Detroit News. Jonathan, welcome. Let's start with the race for governor. The current governor, Republican Rick Snyder, is term limited and will not be running for re-election. And there are 7 total candidates vying for the role. Who are the favorites right now from both parties?
Yeah, that's right. On the Republican side, you've got Rick Snyder's Lieutenant Governor, Brian Calley, who's running, along with Attorney General Bill Schuette, who is actually the front runner for the GOP primary right now. On the Democratic side, Gretchen Whitmer is a former state Senate minority leader. She's locked up a lot of traditional union endorsements and has support from a lot of the party's establishment wing and is the presumptive favorite heading into the primary. But she's facing a pretty significant challenge from Abdul El-Sayed, who's a favorite of the progressive left, and Shri Tanadar, who's also running on a progressive platform and has pumped about $6 million of his own money into the race and has aired a lot of television ads trying to make this thing competitive.
Now, one issue you wrote about that is re-emerging in this governor's race is abortion. This, of course, comes after the president nominated conservative Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And as I understand it, Michigan still has an abortion ban on the books dating back to the 1800s. Is that correct? And how are the candidates in both parties preparing for the possibility that Roe v. Wade could be overturned?
Yeah, Michigan is apparently one of 10 states that still has some of these anti-abortion laws on the books. And Michigan is also unique in that our courts have actually ruled, the appeals court anyways, that Michigan's Constitution itself doesn't ban abortion in the way the U.S. Supreme Court has interpreted the U.S. Constitution. So Michigan, theoretically, if Roe v. Wade were to be overturned by an increasingly conservative Supreme Court, experts say Michigan's law from the 1800s, most recently updated in 1931, would go back into effect immediately. So candidates, competing to take over and run the state are debating how they'd react in that scenario. Democrats, for the most part, all say they'd work very quickly, proactively, in fact, to repeal that old law and to perhaps try and adopt more abortion-friendly laws. Republicans, meanwhile, say they'd sort of sit back and let abortion become illegal again if the Supreme Court ever does revisit Roe v. Wade.
I guess that no one is able to be quiet on this issue, though. Everyone's going to have to make their position clear.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, right now it's not a huge issue in the primary because the candidates on both sides seemingly all agree. But come general election, I imagine it will be a very big issue. Whitmer, who's the front runner in the Democratic side, today released a plan, in fact, for how she would protect Roe v. Wade in Michigan if elected governor.
All right, so let's turn now to the Senate. Democratic Senator Debbie Stabenow is running for a 4th term, but Michigan has gotten a little redder since she last won re-election in 2012. President Trump won the state by a small margin in 2016. So what role is the president playing in this race?
That's right. The president is playing a big role in the U.S. Senate GOP primary. He's playing seemingly a big role in a lot of Republican primaries across Michigan, but the Senate especially. You've got 2 outsider businessmen, much like Trump himself, who are running to take on Stabenow. Both of them are touting their closeness to Trump. Penzler is running commercials saying, put Michigan first, sort of like the president says, put America first. And John James has attacked Penzler for some of his past stances on abortion, suggesting he's not a true conservative. Both of them very actively courting the Trump base, anyways, as they seek to win this primary.
All right. So before we let you go, I want to ask about the Flint water crisis. First off, we want to know, is that all cleaned up? I mean, just last week, an EPA watchdog report blamed both the Michigan Department of Environment Quality and the federal EPA for worsening the crisis. How's it doing? Are any candidates running on a campaign of keeping something like this from happening again?
Yeah, well, to your first question, the Flint crisis, for people living there, it still is a crisis. The water testing has improved. Lead levels are definitely down, but a lot of residents are still skeptical of the water quality and don't want to drink water from their taps until all the lead service lines in the city are replaced. In terms of politics, it's definitely an issue both in the primary and in the general election. On the Republican side, of course, you've got the lieutenant governor, whose administration was in charge when the Flint water crisis happened, and you've got the Attorney General, Bill Schuette, who is currently prosecuting some members of the Snyder administration. So those two are feuding in this primary about Flint. And as far as Democrats, they, of course, see this as a real opportunity to hammer whoever the GOP nominee is in the fall, because this happened, at least from the state failures happened while Republican was in charge.
Right. All right. Well, Michigan political reporter Jonathan Oosting, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me.